This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Care Notes with Doug Wilbur. And Doug, it looks like you're back from Chicago, the meeting you were at last month.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So it's life has moved on, and there's a lot that has happened in between then and now. As a matter of fact, you sent out just a reminder notice with, and I thought, I thought it's been a month, since and I mean, I was literally completely taken aback by it, that in a month. I thought it was like 2 weeks ago. So yeah, my life has gotten busy since being in Chicago.
Okay.
So,
Is the holiday season even busier for you? Because they say that as we age, the holidays are the most difficult and people tend to get sick.
oh yeah, you know it. So there's kind of a weird phenomenon. I think people get sicker when we start getting more cooped up inside, and more people are inside, less fresh air. One of the most powerful antibacterials and antimicrobials is the sun, and so and oxygen and other things, can or oxidation of things can kill things pretty well. So fresh air, sunshine, all of those things are in far shorter supply when we come inside. Matter of fact, it was interesting because I started noticing a couple phenomena that happen, and you're going to be sorry you asked me questions like that, because I just go off. But I saw kind of a weird phenomena happen that I was noticing as I was taking care of people, and I thought, it seems like there are periods of time where there is an increase in the number of deaths, and so and it seemed that it happened a lot of times, at like kind of now between now um the end of the year. Now, it's not like universal. There have been I've actually been tracing it a little bit, and it's so some years we don't have it as much, other years, more, but it was enough that I thought, okay, this is interesting. Also, we started seeing an increase in, people calling us and asking for help. Part of that, I figured, it's people going home and seeing their loved ones having more issues, but it's also referrals and other things that we're getting from facilities because people are getting sick, and they need help because they're coming out in worse shape than they had been, say, a month prior, before having the issues that they did. And so the long answer is yes. There's more sickness, more other things that happen. One of the things I really believe in, and I think there's some science behind this, that it's associated with sunshine or light, and not sunshine, light, and specifically it's associated, I believe, with, as we get closest to the shortest day of the year. Interestingly enough, the solstice happens around the 22nd of December, and the highest day of death around, at least in the northern hemisphere, is actually Christmas Day, and I think that's just because we've hit that low point as far as light.
Sure.
There's all the other combined factors, and it just lands around there. And So yeah, I think it's pretty interesting that this is the time of year for sickness. So sorry
So
you asked that question.
no, I'm really not sorry because it is important, and most of us are seeing that ourselves amongst family members. And I know the time change just messes me up. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
when it was getting dark at 6, I could handle that. But when it's getting dark at 5:30, to me, that's depressing. But what I start doing is looking forward to the fact that, oh, the longest day of the year is a month from now. And then the days are going, I mean, shortest day, and then it's going to start getting longer. So, that's how I
yeah,
get through it. But
yeah,
not everybody does. And especially if they're basically staying at home because it's cold or they're not well, um, seeing the time change like that and it being dark early on, uh, it's got to be very confusing.
yeah. I agree. I do think that, and this is leads into what I'd hoped we'd talk about today a bit, which is about hospice. And we're not a hospice service. I mean, that's not who we are, but we do work with a lot of hospice patients and clients. Um, and we work very closely hand in hand. As a matter of fact, we get a ton of referrals from a hospice of all flavors.
Sure.
There's a number of hospices, not just one, and so we end up having a lot of hospice agencies that refer to us because a hospice is done in the home, and when it's done in the home, hospice does some things, but they don't do other things, and that's where I think oftentimes there's confusion. People think, oh, I'll get a hospice, and then everything, I don't. They're going to send aides 24 hours a day, and it doesn't happen.
Right.
It's not 24 hours a day. It may be a couple days a week, and it may be for in most cases an hour or two, each
Right.
time they're there, mostly to help with bathing. And then you have the nursing assistants and pastoral care and other things that can come in to supplement what what has largely been um, you know uh, uh, is something that maybe the family has been doing, but it doesn't replace the what the family is doing or aides like
Right.
us or services
Exactly.
are doing. So, but it's a hard situation when to kind of say when is the right time for hospice. What is, and I think it's probably starts with what hospice does do. Um, and as I mentioned, it's limited care. And what they're really interested in is making people's lives comfortable. So, and, at the end of life. So, one of the big things that people have to understand is hospice normally comes in when it's determined one way or another that that person has 6 months or less um, predicted, lifespan, um, and so and that's when it kind of becomes appropriate. And how do we make the end of their life as comfortable as possible? And then hospice will provide certain things at that time, as I mentioned, some nursing care. Sometimes doctors can visit in the home, but when you engage hospice, you're basically saying we're not going to be doing any type of heroics.
Right.
Um, we're not going to be treating things. It's not that they don't do any treatments. If someone gets a urinary tract infection, typically they're going to treat that. Any type of acute infection, usually they'll be in most cases treating that some way or another. But if someone's has cancer and they've been on chemotherapy, typically that ends, at the point in time that hospice is engaged. And so, the 6 months is an important thing to consider. And then understanding that if you're wanting still to be doing treatments or other things, you're not going to be getting those treatments for chronic conditions like you were before.
Sure.
Now, the exception to that is, let's say someone is on blood pressure pills, they're not going to take them,
Take them off.
off blood pressure pills in all situations, although sometimes they will. It's interesting, every once in a while someone will go on hospice and they'll take away, the non-necessary pills, the things that aren't important anymore, and all of a sudden the person comes back to life because the medicines were the thing that was making, them kind of go more and more downhill.
That's what we saw with my mother. Now,
Okay,
she
yeah.
still didn't have her eyesight, but they took her off of her thyroid medication and a couple others. And all of a sudden, she was just really vibrant.
Oh, yeah.
But then very shortly after that, it sort of like caught up with her in her case. But I mean, we just got so hopeful for that first week. It was like, oh my God, look at this. And that's why we also put off putting her into hospice, because she was in palliative care. And that's when they
Okay,
took her
yeah.
off some of those. So, yeah.
Yeah, but now when someone goes on hospice, oftentimes they'll start supplying things like if they have incontinence products, they'll oftentimes do that. Different supplies. They'll cover the medicine that's involved in the major diagnosis that is causing them to be on hospice. They'll generally pay those things. You'll probably have to pay for the other. They'll pay for pain medication. So, they may be supplying meds that help someone with, with pain or anxiety or other things that may be associated with end of life, that oftentimes they do. Now, I have this is my view of hospice, or even end of life. And I think it's important. I think life is something that I think is of incredible value, from beginning of life to end of life. I believe very strongly in our Western heritage, that there is something that is breathed into us, that this is a God-given span of time that we have, and that we need to honor and respect that. So I in no way believe in hurrying up death or other things, because I believe strongly that that in the time that we have, we're to use all of it, and that even sometimes going through some of the suffering that happens at the end of life has a purpose, and I've seen it so often that I stand witness that that it's really important that sometimes people have to make amends. Sometimes they need healing. Sometimes there are pieces and parts that need to come together before someone is really ready to go. And I feel that we don't hurry that along. That, I mean, maybe hurry the people being able to do that, but not hurry, someone, out of life. And so I do think that when someone engages hospice, it's not, at that point in time, a death sentence. It's, and I do think that, as someone who has a hospice there, you still need to remain in control, on your loved one's behalf, and realize that they don't have to be over medicated or over sedated in that, because I think what you want to do is you want to take the edge off so someone isn't having pain, to the point where it's intolerable. But you also want them to be, where they can and where it's possible, be functioning,
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
that you can have those interactions and other things.
Now I know when my mother was in hospice, our home care aides could not administer any of the hospice medication. I don't know if that
Mhm.
was a state law or if it's all over. And so it was between my brother and I, one of us had to be assigned. And to me, in the beginning, that was very difficult because it was assigned to me and I was told what the meds were going to do. And I was also told that I had to make a judgment call if she even needed them. Now, yes, I could call hospice, I could talk to the nurse, and I could explain things to them. But what about your staff? Are they permitted to help, or does the family have to get involved?
So family is frequently, very involved in that. Hospice nurses themselves with things. Here's kind of the rule of thumb that we have, which is, um, we we can do med reminders. We can help someone with that. We are not going to make judgments like, on a PRN basis, that someone, is having X amount of pain, and so we're going to make the judgment that now they need a pain medication. We're not taking things out of a bottle, to do it. So that's, kind of the rule of thumb, is that, we're not making those judgments. Family makes those
Right.
judgments, if that's been delegated to them to be able to do that. Or a hospice nurse may make a judgment, and we assist with med reminders when someone is, when it's kind of laid out.
Right.
This is taken, it's in a pill container or whatever. I mean, a pill minder, to take at a certain time in a certain situation. So, there really, we don't have the flexibility of making the determination, but we can assist, the client, in getting the meds on the timely basis. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good explanation.
Yeah. So, tell me this, and if you don't mind me putting you on the spot, but when did you know? And uh, actually, I'm going to go backwards a little bit. So your mom ended up going on hospice initially with palliative,
Right.
and so, um, eh, how did you make that determination? And then how did you make the determination of, going from that to full-blown hospice? And I guess one of the things is, can you explain how they explained to you what palliative care was?
Well, in the beginning, they didn't give us good explanation. I will tell you that. So we were totally confused. Um, but when my mother had her stroke, she was in the hospital for about 4 or 5 days. And she seemed extremely functional, except for the fact that she was blind, but she swore she could see everything and do everything. Um, and so they were going to send her to a rehab. And my brother and I said, she's 96 and a half years old. If we're not supposed to tell her she's blind, what is going to happen in rehab? And they said, oh, you're right. You can put her into a nursing home or you can take her home. So the choice was take her home. So originally we took her home, and the doctor had said she might live a day, she might live a couple of years. We don't know. So we took her home with a wheelchair and a hospital bed, thinking that, she was going to be as functional as we could help her be. And within the first day, we saw that sitting in a wheelchair, she just couldn't sit in it. So we sort of made the decision, my brother and I and the nurse aides, that my mom was really better and safer in the hospital bed. We did have around the clock aides, some very good, some not so good. Wish you guys had been in Michigan at the time. But when we realized that there were so many things that even our aides didn't know how to take care of, we called the Jewish hospice chaplaincy, and they came and talked to us. They told us that palliative care, basically, we could have the aides, whatever medicine my mother had to be on. They could administer, we could administer, but at some point they knew she was going to have to go full-blown hospice. And my brother was the holdout for about 4 weeks. Because the two of us thought of hospice as it is a death sentence. And as soon as we put her on hospice, she'll die. But when they moved her into hospice, when the hospice nurse came in, she explained to us, she said, we're just going to keep your mother comfortable, but you have to be the barometer. You know your mom. You see what the changes she's going through. So and her big thing was anxiety. And anxiety was that she really couldn't see, so she didn't understand where she was. And they said, here's a hospice box. And they told me what all the different meds were inside of it. And before you give her any medication, call us and talk it through. And there were a couple of times I called and they said, no, it doesn't sound like she really needs it. You probably need something. She doesn't need it. And that was helpful. But we didn't have people we had a few people come into the house, but not regularly. The two rabbis who came to see her regularly, they were wonderful. They held my hand through it all. But it's hard making that decision, and I understood where my brother was coming from. He was prepared. We'll live here for the next year if we have to. Wouldn't that be wonderful? But that's realizing her conversations were not the same. She was asking about things that, we couldn't even, they say, go along with somebody who's going through dementia. We were afraid to, because she kept seeing a little boy in the room and she kept asking us to take him out. How can we take something out that's not there? So for anybody who's going through this, you need a support system. And if the first hospice organization you contact isn't the right one, find somebody else. I would say 99% of the ones that we've talked to were absolutely wonderful. We just happened to have one that I think was overly busy at the time and just didn't have the staffing.
Yeah, the idea with palliative care, just kind of for whoever's picking up on the podcast, is that it's kind of like a pre-hospice. It's providing services, but still doing other care. That you're not like saying, okay, this is hospice, and it's more kind of getting the clients or family, others familiar with what hospice services are able to do, but still doing regular, ongoing, interventions with people. And then when you move over to hospice, it's really kind of that knowledge that, hey, it's 6 months or less likely at this point in time. We're gonna do, we're not gonna do heroics or other things, and there's going to be a higher focus on things that are more related to end of life. I mean, very end of life, and making that person comfortable and other things. So, those things are, it's important, but that decision to say, okay, it's, we're moving to a different place for so many. And I assume that it might have been this with your brother. It's like, I'm giving up on mom. And, that, and I'm admitting that, she is, passing. And a part of it is the kind of a misunderstanding. It isn't for the very, very, last moment, so that when you sign up for hospice, it doesn't mean they're going to die, the next day.
Right.
As a matter of fact, so often it's months, of time, that goes on before that person passing. Is just a knowledge and acknowledging that, we're kind of in a new phase. So I think there's a lot of fear around it because of the fact that somehow by saying this, now the person's going to pass away. A bit of it is, just misunderstanding, but I think a bit of it is also, it's our mind jumps
Yep.
ahead several steps, and that this means this, and hospice means death. I've seen times where someone's been on hospice and they get pulled off of it because they just did okay, and so all of a sudden they had a significant improvement. It doesn't happen often, but it has happened, and
Right.
I've seen it happen where someone has gone off of hospice, and eventually maybe go back on, but it might be 2 years later,
Yeah.
for that. So, generally speaking, that, as I mentioned before, it's not trying to expedite things. It's just providing services so that as things go along, there's going to be the ability to take care of it, and things are set in place. Also, things are paid for that otherwise, it's a benefit that comes out of being under hospice, at that point in time. And again, this other thing that I think people don't always understand, when someone goes on hospice, it doesn't mean you're stuck. It's not like you now have a plank that you can't walk back. Yeah, that you if for example someone has something that goes on and you decide, no, I don't believe that this is the time. You can change your mind. You can send someone to, the hospital. Now they'll get removed from hospice typically, if it wasn't, instructed by the hospice nurse to do it. If you're saying no, do intervention now, and it wasn't kind of hospice approved, but there's nothing that says you're now stuck. Um, and um, and this decision is the final decision, with it, and I think that's important. And then you can eventually go back on hospice, even in those circumstances. So, but I will tell you that for most people, it's a real struggle because of that sense of, like, that, and even guilt, like I've given up on mom, or
Well,
I've given up on my dad, or
and I saw that struggle in him, but the interesting point was when he then said, you have to know what's in the box. You have to know how to administer it. I'll be here to hold your hand if you need me to. It was like, he's my older brother, and my oldest brother's in California. I've always been the baby of the family, and now I'm being responsible. And even though I felt honored in a way to be there for my mother, I just had in the back of my mind, every time I give her one more dose of morphine, she's getting closer to death. But I was very lucky that one of my mother's aides said to me, your mother is already close to death. You are keeping her comfortable. So when she is agitated, when she's not eating, when you hear her labor breathing and you put oxygen on her, you're doing things to make her comfortable for her transition.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I remember hearing it now, but at the time it didn't connect. And now it's like, I was there for her. I did help her.
And just so people understand what you mean by the box, it's sometimes it's a bag, it's sometimes it's, it's like, but it's something that it can be used when someone's closer for pain management and other things. It's not like arsenic is.
Oh, no.
So, it's like the box, and
actually, in there was like a muscle relaxant, which was the first thing, because she would start twitching, and they would tell us, when you see this, and if it lasts more than so many minutes, okay, your mother really needs this. And it was just a normal dose, but she couldn't swallow. So, I had to put it, inside her cheek and, sadly hold her mouth together until she swallowed it or absorbed it.
Yeah.
But those are the things that they help you with and they teach you about. I just wish I would have understood it before I had to do it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, so much of what happens with care and taking care of someone, we learn on the job.
Yeah.
You learn as you go. That's why I do believe, it's so important to have organizations and people and, hospice and home care and stuff where you have, someone that can assist. Oftentimes people become more bedbound with hospice, or not a hospice, at end of life, and you need the help to change that person and do other things. And even though there are some things that aides can't do, as we were talking a little bit before, there's there's tremendous amount that we're able to do, and making sure that everything runs really, really smoothly, and that the care is given so that they are comfortable.
Right.
They are, you know, it, you know, that their needs are taken care of, that they're changed and not wet and not having skin breakdown. And so often we can make sure that happens as effectively as possible. And that's really the part that I want to talk about, which is the place that home care actually has, which is that we're doing that. We're able to do the changes. We're able to do the bathing and the grooming and the feeding if someone needs that. The holding their hands and being the company for individuals, making sure that they're dry and warm and comfortable with that, and helping with the med reminders, and getting the things taken care of that need to be taken care of, so that someone can stay at home. Because I can tell you that people don't want to die in the hospital. They want to die at home. as a rule. That's where someone wants
Sure.
to pass away, and if you can make that happen, it's really a gift. And so because of the limitations that hospice has, that's where working hand in hand, and we work as a team with the hospices. That's why we're suggested so often, is so that we can work hand in hand. We're doing a part, they're doing a part, the family's doing a part. And one of our, my goals is so that family can be um, at the end of life, so that I really want to liberate family members so that they are not caregivers at the end, but they can be their children, or they can be the brother or sister or whoever it is, that they're not forced into something. They're not, the spouse doesn't have to be caregiver. They can be, the wife or the husband for that person. And that's one of the greatest gifts that we're able to give with that, is that you can have quality time and not time trying to do something that that you're either not capable physically or even mentally to be able to do, as well as someone else that is doing it. So instead of it being a point of frustration, you can be there and be that child, that spouse, that brother, that sister, whatever it is, for the person that you love. So,
And the caregiver oftentimes is that extra hug for the family member,
oh yeah,
the pat on the back, or telling you, yeah, yes, go ahead and cry, or tell me your stories. Um, Sometimes I wondered if they were there more for me than they were for my mother.
yeah.
Um, and that to me is a beautiful gift that a caregiver gives.
Well, I can tell you this as well, and maybe this is a good thing to wrap up with. I know that our caregivers, as a rule, see it as a privilege to be able to be there when someone passes. And unless you've been with someone who passed away, you may not fully understand what I mean. But the there is something very profound about being with someone as they pass away, and something even spiritual about that time in that moment. You know that I can only say you only understand it if you've been there. And so when our caregivers are able to be there, and oftentimes they'll do aftercare or whatever, they see it as a a way of giving, a way of making a difference in a family's life, but also in that person's life, and that they were able to be a part of that at that time, is seen as like I said again, a real privilege. And so you know as you're considering hospice, and as you're trying to make that really difficult decision, realize that home care is likely to be a part of that journey as well. So,
Absolutely.
well,
Well,
with that,
before we end this, I just want to say that two of my mother's caregivers I still remain in touch with. Um, Kavia was there to tell, actually, she called us into my mother's room when she noticed that my mother was at the end, and Robin, who just never gave up. So,
mm,
you know, they're a family to me, and they
yeah,
always will be. And I'm sure you have many that are working with you that are the exact same way. So
yeah,
goes to all
yeah.
of you.
Well, I know people, sometimes even the idea of hospice is a terrifying thing, and it shouldn't be. And I think once you've been involved with hospice, um, that a lot of people have a lot of really fond memories of, even the hospice workers that have come in to assist as well. So with that, I want to say that I look forward to our next meeting and hope that this is helpful for some that are, watching this program. So
We hope you all stay healthy for Thanksgiving, which is coming up next week. So
all right. It
have a
sounds
great
good.
day, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Thanks.